Mo Cohen will be speaking about the mother of all crises, the institutional art world's response to the climate change. Mo is an art scholar who holds a PhD from the Manchester Metropolitan University. She explores the relationship between politics and arts and how politics is practical through art, and how the political struggles can impact the creation of new aesthetic landscapes. So welcome, Mo.
Hi, and thanks very much for coming and for organizing this conference. And I think even if I'm mostly talking about the climate crisis, it might have to do a little bit with the reasons Herag, for example, decided not to participate, because as you'll see, my main focus is not artworks that kind of have certain kind of reflection and responses to the climate crisis, but rather more of art, activist campaigns and activist interventions within the art institutions that aim to put pressure on structural issues such as funding, sponsorship, and support from polluting companies. So maybe it will make those connections. I will share my screen now. Wait a minute. Wait, sorry. I practiced this a lot and now I'm making a lot of problems. Can you see it full screen?
We don't see full screen, but we see it.
Okay, so I'll just keep to it like this. So as I said, I will talk about some of the actions taken by major art institutions to tackle the climate crisis we've been facing for quite some time. And in relations to the conference theme, the moment of truth, we can ask ourselves, how can we describe the current moment we live in terms of the climate challenges that we face? So one response is the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in his statement during the 2019 UN Climate Summit in Madrid, where he said that we have reached the point of no return. It is a point where catastrophic tipping point scenarios, such as the destruction of the Amazon forest and the collapse of ice sheets, are happening faster as we previously predicted. And we are in a position that we can slow it down and adjust to it only if we take immediate transformative actions. 2019 was indeed a year that saw this wide consensus on this matter among scientists, schoolgirls, and the general public. We saw mass movements taking over big squares in Parliament House, such as Extinction Rebellion in the UK, the Sunrise Movement in the US, and the youth strike for climate all over the world, and more states and cities declaring climate emergency. So one of the major steps taken by the art world was the Tate Museum's declaration of climate emergency. This declaration followed by an exhibition of the artist Olafur Eliasson that has these large-scale installations that explore human-nature relations, public debate on environmental issues in the Turbine Hall, and several organizational decisions to reduce Tate's carbon footprint by at least 10% by 2023, and switching into a green electricity tariff across its 4 galleries. 3 years before this declaration, so in 2016, Tate ended 26 years of partnership with BP, the British multinational oil and gas corporation. This partnership came to an end after several years of activist campaign led by the collective Liberate Tate that, as its name suggests, aims to free art and cultural institutions from their association with one of the 20 companies responsible to 1/3 of all carbon emission within the last 5 decades. So By focusing on several artistic campaigns that have contributed to making this moment of declaring climate emergency possible, I will ask several questions, such as what characterizes the current artistic reactions to the climate crisis that we see in museums, and how do these reactions shape and help reorganizing the art world as a whole? And finally, and this has become a lot more of a open question that I'm still asking myself, I do want to ask how this reaction illuminate what I think is a problematic framing of the climate crisis and its potential solution in the artistic, public, and political discourse in Israel. So these are some of the examples of the activist campaigns that Liberate Tate organized in order to put pressure on Tate Museum to end its partnership with BP. Liberate Tate was established in January 2010 by a participant of the Art and Activism workshop organized by Tate Educational Department. And for 5 years, between 2010 to 2015, the collective organized dozens of unauthorized demonstrations that were all held without permissions around the Tate Gallery halls. This intervention protested against what Liberate Tate described as the art wash of polluting companies through corporate sponsorship of the arts in order for these companies to appear as a significant contributor to society, and thus masking immense environmental damage that their corporate greed produces. So according to one of the founders of Liberate Tate, Mel Evans, this phenomena of art wash of oil sponsorship is quite extensive. And here we can see a small example of companies that's oil and coal companies that may not be on the top 5, but still holds quite a respectable place with the carbon footprint, while art wash sponsoring very major art institutions. But what is striking in Mel Evans' research is the unique place that 2 major oil companies, British BP and British Dutch Shell, take in sponsoring some of the most touristic and leading art institutions in the world, many of them that are located in London and Amsterdam. The first action that Liberate Tate took against Tate and BP characterized also future action that Liberate Tate took, but also other similar groups took. Their first action that Liberate take in the Tate called License to Spill in June 2010. It was during a fancy summer party at the Tate that marked the 20th anniversary between Tate and BP. It was also, however, only 3 months after what is called the explosion of the Deepwater Horizon drilling dig that was operated by a different oil company, but it was done for BP. The explosion of the drilling dig led to major oil spill on the Gulf of Mexico, and nowadays considered to be one of the largest ecological disasters that its full long-term consequences are still unknown to us. So during this performance, and by the way, all the performances that we can see here, I really recommend going to Liberate Tate website and other groups that we'll see here, because they do document all their activities in video and in stills, and it's a huge resources of their really long time activism. So in License to Spill, during this performance, Mel Evans and Anna Feigenbaum from Liberate Tate managed to sneak in the fancy party reception while wearing fluffy floral dresses that hide underneath them 10 liters of oil-like liquid. In the reception, they tore up the bags that sealed the liquid, letting it spill all around them. They then put on themselves these white cleaning robes with BP logo on them and started cleaning the liquid, although they made a bigger mess. The spill performance imitated the Deepwater Horizon explosion, and the immediate defensive and evasive comments given by BP. While cleaning, Mel and Anna assured the audience that everything is under control and that it is simply one tiny drop in the vast museum, which was a paraphrase to the then BP CEO Tony Hayward's reaction to the disaster that this is simply just a minor spill of oil in the vast ocean. Outside of the museum, in the main entrance, other activists wearing black clothes and veils spilled black liquid from cans with BP logo on them. So the performative style that we saw in Liberate, and especially the use of this kind of oil-like thick liquid as a visual symbol against the art wash of old sponsorship, repeats itself in other major art institutions. Fossil-free culture Netherlands, for example, have been campaigning for transforming Amsterdam Museum Square free from oil sponsorship, and especially from Shell Company, the big oil donor in the Netherlands. Other example in the UK is the group BP or Not BP that organized similar intervention to Liberate in other cultural institutions in London that are supported by BP. Most of their current actions are held at the British Museum, and especially around a series of exhibitions that are called the BP exhibition series. So the connection, the sponsoring connections between BP and the major museum is very visible. You can see their logo everywhere. So it's really hard not to, it's not something that they try to hide it. It's quite visible in many parts of the galleries there. So what can we learn from these artivist campaigns on the way that climate crisis can help reshape the art world's mode of operation and organization? So one argument that is that in comparison to past artistic engagement in environmental issues, and in comparison with previous art turns, in the current climate emergency moment lies a call for a systemic change of the art world as a whole that can produce new relations between centers and peripheries, mainstream and margins. There has been a constant movement. I'm just double checking that you can see every time I switch a presentation. Can you see every time I show a different presentation? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. All right, good. So there has been a constant movement in terms of space and center and margin relations, that there has been a constant movement between environmental campaigns that move away from big centers towards sites where the extractive and polluting activity is happening, such as drilling sites, coal sites, sites where a new polluting industries are about to be built. And in this case, I recommend watching the video works of the artist Oliver Ressler that documents a lot of these campaigns, and his works are available in his website. So there is this movement from going away to the places where the actual polluting activity is happening, and back again to the center, to the power centers, where we can start seeing emergence of a larger critical mass that is formed around these power centers, and sometimes is able to penetrate and disturb them. So this movement between margins and mainstream is crucial because it reflects processes where the centers start acknowledging and embracing the demands of struggles that were previously dismissed. And this change in attitude is, of course, the result of a long grassroots and behind the scene work, and as well as intensified media coverage that contribute to a change in public opinion that public institutions such as the Tate aim to represent. And another argument that can be made in regards to artists and activists choosing to target major institutions such as the Tate is that they distinguish between the global expansion or the global appearance of multinational corporations they have sites all around the world, and strategic locations where they capital, the financial capital and also the cultural capital is accumulated. And we can see it in the case of BP and other big oil companies' decision to financially support cultural institutions only in these capital centers and other locations where there is an intention to expand the polluting energy market, and as a result to invest in lobbyist activity and public relations. As a result, targeting major art institutions that dictate the artistic agenda and enjoy the exposure of million tourists and art lovers relies on the high possibility that other art and cultural institutions will embrace similar policy towards all sponsorship, which indeed what started to happen since the Tate ended its relations with BP in 2016. And here what I did, so yeah, I marked in greens all the previous art institutions that have ended their sponsorship, their contract with all companies. Needless to say that the Tate and other institutions do not credit the long-term campaign against them. It's rather professional decisions that led to the end of the sponsorship. Another unique aspect that characterizes artistic actions in time of climate emergency is the way that they also rely and engage with other artistic turns that have gained attention in the art world, and especially around the decolonial discourse in regards to the art canon and the question of repatriation of looted objects. For example, in BP or not BP action, constant links are made between extractivism, which is the process of taking natural resources such as gas, oil, and metals from their natural habitat. So between extractivism and colonialism. In the British Museum exhibition, I am Ashur ben Nepal, the king of the world, king of Assyria. That was also part of the BP exhibition series. BP or not BP members and Iraqi activists placed alternative reception, which includes several podiums, protest signs, and performance that emphasize BP ties with the invasion to Iraq, while also making the case that has been loudly made by post-colonial states, researchers, and art practitioners to return looted treasures, such as the one depicted in the Ashur ben Nepal exhibition, to its original location. Another example we can see over here is the constant collaboration made between the BP or not BP campaign and indigenous activists from Okinawa that organize alternative art tours at the British Museum around artifacts and monuments that were looted from their communities. So the artistic and activist action of decolonize this place is another good example of how these connections between a climate crisis and other crises that we're currently facing are being made. So Decolonize This Place is a coalition of grassroots movement and organization that operates within the cultural sphere to promote political, socialist, and environmental struggles. One of the most publicized action took place at the Whitney Museum and started around the end of 2018 and throughout 2019 until the Whitney Biennale officially opened. The purpose of this action was to put pressure on Whitney's management to remove one of its vice chancellors, Warren B. Kenders, from its role because of its other role as the CEO of the arms company Safariland, which is a company that sells weapons to police and security forces and is used amongst other on Mexican immigrants on the US-Mexico border, on Afro-American protesters in Ferguson, indigenous protesters from the Standing Rock Resort, that when I refer to them that protesting against the oil pipeline, and there's also Palestinian protester in Gaza. The main action that Decolonize Displaced organized was this 9-week of direct actions that included distributing flyers in the museum, holding protest signs, doing all kinds of chanting and dancing. And in addition, every week was also dedicated to a specific struggle that Decolonize This Place aimed to promote, its connection to Safariland and to other struggles, such as public housing, debt erasure, and independence struggles in Puerto Rico, Kashmir, and Palestine. Despite the heavy security placed on the protesters and the initial dismissive response from Whitney's museum management, on the 30th of July 2019, Kenders indeed resigned from his role as a vice chancellor in the Whitney's board. So if an oil-like liquid was the dominant visual means that represent many of the actions taken in Amsterdam and London against art wash of oil sponsorship, then empty tear gas cans with Safariland logo on them have become a medium that tried to embrace all the struggle represented by Decolonize This Place. So according to art researcher TJ Demos, tear gas as a means of controlling and organizing space and population, falsely branded as a non-lethal weapon and also a direct contributor to greenhouse gas emissions because it's made out of methane gas that is being extracted from the earth. This becomes this kind of common denominator that makes any struggle over the freedom of expression, movement, equality before the law, and simply the right to breathe an illegitimate one. So choosing tear gas over other mediums more directly associated with pollution and global warming produce a different terminological system where we can think about the current emergency we live in and consequently the steps we need to take to fight it. Amongst other, this terminological system creates particularization within a crisis that, despite being depicted as universal, is not equal in terms of the type of population that are most affected by it, and in terms of the time frame in which the breakdown of ecological system will fatally start hitting. So looking at some of these successful art campaigns that have brought to the center of major art institutions question of complicity, accountability, and responsibility of the art world in times of multiple and overlapping crises, I ask myself, how do art institutions in Israel respond to this issue? While this subject is almost completely ignored in the cultural sphere, but also in the political one, which perhaps can explain partially this indifference, I came across two events, both took place in Tel Aviv Museum at a few months difference, and can be seen perhaps as a first steps to institutionally respond to the climate crisis within art institutions. The first one was the fourth climate conference that was hosted by the museum in November 2019. And the second one was the exhibition Solar Guerrilla, Constructive Responses to Climate Change, which was closed, but a virtual tour is still available on Tel Aviv Museum website. In both examples, it is possible to see a separation between distinct fields of knowledge and a technocratic approach to the climate crisis, as presented in the speaker list of the conference that mostly included scientists, CEOs, and electors, but also in the exhibition that explored possible solution to the climate crisis is developed by architects, energy, and technology experts. The place of art as a field that needs to both tackle its own climate-related issue, but also as a field that can offer complex and nuanced insights on this crisis, is absent in both cases. It is possible that the climate conference organizers were simply looking for a place to host their event. Yet the exhibition emphasized even more the neutral position of a major art institution took, as it represented the climate crisis as an issue that other people are working on it. So this technocratic and didactic approach to this exhibition, which is full of illustrations, statistics, model, and explanatory videos, ignore the political aspect of this crisis, thus leaving many questions unanswered, such as how did we get to this situation in the first place? And why, given the technological abilities, we have not been able to achieve the climate goals we set to ourselves. Furthermore, focusing on technological interventions that aim to tackle and fix climate change themselves encapsulate some kind of a clear ideological worldview of green capitalism that places the market as the major arena where a solution can happen. This standpoint, of course, is valid, and we do need to harness the market to help tackling climate catastrophe. However, this view has also been under scrutiny and criticism for quite a while, with critiques such as that the market suggests very speculative and futuristic solutions, from green capitalism shifting the blame and responsibility on the individual and its consumer to the individual and its consumerist choices. That green capitalism focus on minor climate issues rather than the main causes for pollution and global warming. And also that green capitalism itself being another form of greenwash, as major polluting companies keep investing most of their money on new oil and gas projects and using even more unconventional and harmful drilling method. And we can look, for example, at the entrance of Chevron to the gas market in Israel in the last few weeks. Considering these critiques, the exhibition Solar Guerrilla can be understood as another form of art wash by not providing a more complex context and case studies outside of the tech and engineering world, from which the green technological approach can be critically examined. Given the ways in which the art field in Israel has been expanded, it is also possible to argue that major art institutions lack the same power they used to have in dictating the artistic agenda. Yet the expansion of the art field into multiple alternative art centers and hubs does not necessarily mean taking a more critical and intersectional and interdisciplinary approach to the climate crisis. And this is going to be my last slide. So just a final example of this, of how those things are not linked, even if we leave the major art institution to other alternative art centers. We can take a look at the case of South Tel Aviv, and particularly the new central bus station area that and this area, which is often celebrated as a different, authentic, exotic, and most importantly, much cheaper area that can be an opportunity, especially for young artists and curators, to come and work and create new type of art. While many of the cultural centers that operate within the central bus station would probably struggle to find alternative renting spaces for the activities in Tel Aviv, there is a long-standing criticism raised by local activists, and has been pretty much ignored by many art practitioners working there, that continue collaborating with the bus station management with short and long-term art projects, only offer an additional validation to one of the most harmful and polluting sites in the country. Art is not the cause for this pollution, of course, and the neglect of this area. At the same time, not being able to first conceive the local struggle as a climate emergency, and second, as an emergency that art production is tied up with, is another presentation of how the narrow framing of climate issues within the public and artistic discourse prevent us from making crucial connections and necessary particularization of the climate crisis within our own geopolitics. So I will just finish with final comments that what I aimed to show in the previous example is the importance of critical and stubborn mass, that without it, major public and democratic institutions will continue with their status quo. The examples also demonstrate the importance of critical and political analysis that support climate activism, such as the case of the British Museum refusal to untie its connection to extractivist and colonial practices, and such as with the case of decolonized displays that choose the tear gas as a symbol of intersectional struggle that does not separate between climate, racial, and economic justice. The complicated and sensitive matters in which climate is tied up with security, housing, inequality, and natural resources, and the ways in which we, as an occupying society, need to confront these ties and untangle them, should be at the center of any artistic activity that sees itself committed to the climate emergency. And perhaps this is what we are required to do in this current moment of no return. Okay, so that's it.
Thank you, Mo.